Hi, everybody. My name is Liam, and I am going to be chatting for the next 45 and maybe, if we're lucky, hour with Annette Franz, who is a author. She is the head honcho at cxjourney.com, which we're going to add inside of the show notes. And she's written two books, Built to Win and Customer Understanding. We're actually going to be talking a lot more about Built to Win, but based off of where we're at right now, I also would like to be able to talk a little bit about customer understanding and for where we are contextually, just to kind of let you know. The current date is, what's the date, Annette?
March 14th. It's Pi Day.
Oh, there we go. Okay. I can see that you're a nerd too, which is great. We're going to get along perfectly. So last week, the one of the largest banks in tech, the largest bank in tech, collapsed. SVB. And I personally took a couple $1,000,000 out of Mercury, which is a connected bank to Silicon Valley Bank. That wire is still currently pending. So that's kind of where I'm at right now in terms of context of seeing where I'm seeing where we're at. And I also, over the last 5 to 6 days, I've had over a dozen friends of mine that have reported back saying, I have 5 million, I have 10 million, I have $60 million with Silicon Valley Bank, and I got $1 million out, I got $500,000 out. I think we're actually going to, over the next couple of weeks, see the unraveling of the US economy and by extension the global economy. And I really want to kind of nail into that because Annette's got a very interesting perspective on what we need to be able to continue on focusing on during that time, which is focusing on our employees and focusing on our customers. So Annette, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
What's your perspective on where we're going with the economy right now? Where do you see us kind of being in another 3 months from now?
Oh, goodness. Had you asked me 3 months ago, I would say, we're heading in the right direction.
Right.
There's not going to be a recession, or if there is, there's going to be, maybe it'll just be a light blip on the radar. But boy, after these last couple of days here, it's starting to look a little dicey. And I think, as we talked about before we came on, that there is an impending recession. And the only question is going to be how rough is it going to be? And I think some of the things we'll talk about today will help sort of shore up some of the things that businesses need to do, both for customers and employees, to ensure that they, there's that business continuity, that they stay as strong as they can throughout. But I think right now, we're with, interest rates and home sales and mortgages and I mean, all of it, it's just, it's a it's a nightmare on the verge, is what I'm saying.
Right. And so in that context, you had recently written Built to Win, which I believe came out a year ago.
March 22nd of last year.
March 22nd of last year. And that book focuses on designing a customer-centric culture that drives value for your business. I'd love for you to expand on that, and I swear for everyone that's listening right now, we're going to tie this back to SVB definitively. But give me a brief overview of the book and what you're trying to teach there.
Well, here's the interesting thing, and this is how we tie it back to everything, right? The heart of the business really is our customers.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have customers, we got nothing, right? The purpose of a business is to create and to nurture a customer, and really, if we don't put them at the heart of everything that we're doing, I define a customer-centric culture as one where there's no discussions, no decisions, no designs without bringing that customer voice in, without asking how is it going to impact the customer, how's it going to make her feel, what value does it add for the customer, what problems does it solve. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important way to think about your business and think about what you're doing day in and day out. And so a customer-centric culture is one that has the values are all very closely connected to being just that, right? You're going to have your culture is core values plus behavior. You're going to have core values that are all going to be defined relative to how we interact with each other as employees, but especially how we interact and how we do things with and by and for our customers. And so I think that's really important. And tying those values to driving value, going back to the title of the book, values drive values create value, right? If we have core values that put the customer at the heart of the business, customers like to do business with, especially today, we're seeing this more and more, where customers want to do business with companies and brands that they align with, right? Whether it's purpose or whatever it is, right? And I think values are at the heart of that. And so values drive value in that sense, that if customers are aligned with the core values and with the culture of your business, they will come. You build it and they will come, right? So I think that's an important way to look at values being a driver of value for customers and ultimately then for the business.
Who, in your opinion, right now is doing this correctly? And maybe if you want to throw them under the bus, who is doing it incorrectly right now?
Well, there's some of the, the classic examples. I can't talk about a customer-centric culture without talking about Zappos, right? I mean, they are just really the original, the OGs, the OGs of a customer-centric culture, right?
You know what? If you pause right there for a second, I literally have, I don't have it in front of me. I have the Zappos culture book back from 2011. Darn, I don't have it around me.
I've got one in my bookshelf.
Yeah,
too.
and
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I remember Vegas. I feel it was 2013, 2014, and the late Tony Hsieh now, which is just, I mean, I'm still shocked at that.
Me too.
Invited a whole bunch of tech startups to come to Vegas because he said, I'm going to build the next Silicon Valley in Vegas. And I love people that have that type of a vision, where I think there was an expert on building cities. There was some book that that Tony had read, and he said, this expert said, yeah, if you want to build a Silicon Valley, you need an urban center and you need a university. And he's like, okay, well, there's a university in Vegas, and I just bought 14 blocks of downtown Las Vegas.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
What? And and we're going to build this absolute huge ecosystem. And I remember going there, and there was just so much energy. And everyone that goes there gets a tour of the Zappos factory or the Zappos facility, the customer support department, all this kind of stuff. And that culture, I mean, you could feel it. It was bleeding off the walls. And I loved how connected everyone was, and more importantly, how Tony was really trying to build that for his next project, which was building his ecosystem inside of Las Vegas. So you think that they're doing it right?
Absolutely. I think that they're doing it right. And throughout the book, I've scattered other companies as well. So in the book, I talk about the 10 foundational principles of developing or having a customer-centric culture, a customer-centric organization. And so each principle has a couple of different examples of brands that are doing it well. And so I talk about brands that you wouldn't even think about. Campbell's Soup. I talk about Guinness, the beer brand, right? Guinness, and how I believe I actually have them in the chapter about employees. Employees must come more first. If you're going to be customer centric, if you're going to put the customer at the heart of the business, you have to put employees more first. And I think they were the OGs when it came to the things that they did for their employees back in the day and still do. I talk about, obviously Starbucks. I know recently they've had their own set of challenges. Delta Airlines. Delta Airlines is a favorite of mine. Ed Bastian has done a great job of putting the employee experience and the customer experience, really just taking all of that to heart and having people at the center of the business.
Mm-hmm.
Southwest Airlines, up until Christmas, Southwest Airlines was certainly a prime example of that. I know they've got their set of challenges, but that's really around the technology that they've not kept updated and their business model as well. I would say, do I want to call out anybody not doing a great job? Gosh, everybody else.
Well, so this ties it back to what we're currently going to experience over the next couple of weeks, which is the employee is going to be thrown out the window in the next couple of weeks to months, right? We're going to see a massive, and I'm talking massive shift of are we going to have equality? Are we going to have equity inside of our organizations? No, that's, and I'm just speaking real talk here. When you cannot get capital, when the economy is in a downturn, and particularly where I come from in the tech industry, we're going to see tech get a lot tougher. And to be honest with you, tech has been very weak, very, very soft, right? Particularly over the last couple of years, as we've seen just these valuations absolutely explode. And I thought that this balloon was going to pop multiple times. I mean, it still fundamentally hasn't popped because Biden saved the tech industry literally last week or a few days ago. But for that challenge, right? And maybe there's someone that's listening right now that's saying to themselves, hey, you know, I've frozen hiring for the next 2 or 3 quarters, or I am looking to cut 10, 20, 30% of my workforce. What do you say to them to be able to try to make sure that you're putting the employee at the center of the customer experience?
Yeah, I think don't forget about, I get it, you're going to have to do layoffs, but don't use some of the examples of how not to do it that we've seen over the last couple of years, right? You know, think about your employees and make the message about them and about how you can help them and that you care about them and what are some of the things that you're going to do to help you know, offboard them. You know, I forget who it was just in the last couple of days who talked about layoffs and said basically that's what they were doing. They were not only going to cover, you know, some severance and, you know, some of these different, you know, benefits or whatever you want to call them but they were going to help, you know, set up help for them to help them find a new job. Just other things that are just like humans taking care of humans. I think that's the bottom line there, right? That's really sort of the foundation of it is we're all people who should care about the people and not just make it some ruthless message. And then don't forget the people that, so you've first got to take care of the people that you're letting go, right? I think that's a really important, it's an important thing because ultimately the way they leave is how they view you and talk about you going forward. So if you do a great job of it and you take care of them, they will always have great things to say about you regardless, right? But if you make it a shit show, you know, they're out there talking poorly about you. They're never going to buy from you. They're never going to recommend you. They'll never recommend somebody go work for you in the future, you know, those kinds of things. So you really want to be careful and take great care with the people who are leaving. But then you can't forget the people who are staying. You have to know that those people are all going to be taking on, you know, wearing different hats because they're going to be and taking on more of a workload because they get to, you know, pick up where everybody else left off. And so I think it's really important that we acknowledge that and address how we're going to help these people as well, right? The employees that are still with us, and we certainly can't forget about that. So, and I think that it all goes to the root of that all is if we were doing all of these things great from the start. So I'm working with a couple of startups, right? So if we get the culture right from the start, if we have a great employee experience, and employee experience is so much more than just, you know, perks and free beer and, you know, those kinds of things. If we really care about the employee and take care of the employee, their, you know, growth and development and feedback and coaching and all of the things that employees are looking for, then going through the hard times is going to be a lot easier, right? If we have already got that foundation in place, and the same thing goes for the customer experience too, right? So if we already have that foundation in place, we have to keep doing the things that we've been doing. Don't drop the ball on those things. I know, you know, earlier it said that it's gonna be tough for employees and for customers going forward. It will, but it really is up to the leadership team to have that, and for those that aren't immediately affected, get your ducks in a row and really get the employee experience and the customer experience where it needs to be so that when you are impacted down the line, and this happened during COVID, we saw this during COVID too, right? Things just started to fall apart. But if you had already had that foundation in place, you would just continue doing what you're doing. It's going to be on a smaller scale, and there's going to be other factors that are just making it, you know, challenging. But because you've already got that muscle in place, right, it's going to you're going to just keep building on that. So I think that's an important message is get the foundation right and keep going with that, so that you have that continuity going forward.
When you talk about foundation, what are you specifically talking about? Could you give me some examples of what you mean by building that core foundation?
Yeah, I would start with the culture, right? I would absolutely start with the culture. Culture is deliberately designed to be the way that you want it to be, right? And so, and culture ultimately becomes how we do things around here, regardless, right? It's if my boss is in my office, if the CEO's around, if I'm, we talked about remote, if I'm remote or if I'm working hybrid or I'm in the office, 100% of the time, it doesn't matter. Culture is how we do things, the DNA of the organization, and it's what people look to as sort of our guiding light, our guiding star, our North Star when it comes to, is that the right thing to do, or what do we do next, or how do we do this? Right. It all flows through the lens of those core values, right? So really, that is the foundation of the business, absolutely.
So, I mean, and just to kind of give you context here, we use Entrepreneur Operating System, which is basically just a vision traction organizer as the core document of what we're about, our mission, our values, who we are as a company, where we want to go over the next 3 years. And we continuously reiterate that inside of the organization. But one of the things that I've done recently is we recently had our company retreat. And at that company retreat, I handed everyone a single piece of paper because we had not been able to meet for 3.5 years because of COVID, and we run a remote company in 28 different countries all over the world. So show up day one, literally the first 5 minutes, hand everyone a piece of paper, they flip it over, and it is, what is the mission of the company? What are our top 6 values? We have 6 of them.
Yeah.
What are we passionate about? What do we sell? How do we actually encapsulate that passion into a product or service? What's our guarantee? So all of the things that we have inside of the Vision Traction Organizer. And 17% of the people that I gave this document to, and by the way, before I even started, I said, this is an anonymous document. You can put your name on it if you want. And if you don't want to, that's fine. But what I'm really focused on is identifying how many of you are actually able to complete the document. 17% got a perfect score on that document, which is not really good for me, right? Like, so one of the things that we actually identified was we had company values like passionate about what we do. And so we've now changed that to, we switched it from passionate, again, we're still working it out right now, to missionaries, not mercenaries. So something a little bit more clearer for people to understand, which is we're here to help facilitate the world's transition towards remote work. That's the mission of our company. That's what we're passionate about. So being passionate just in general feels like corporate speak, but missionaries, not mercenaries, meaning we're here to be able to spread the word, and we're not necessarily here just to be able to collect a check. Seems to ring a lot more true with people, and I'm hopeful that there will be a higher ratio of people next year that actually are able to get a perfect score.
I love that. That's a great exercise to do, and like I said, I'm not surprised. I've seen other studies where that's actually higher percentage than some of the studies that I've seen.
Make me feel better. What are the percentages of people that can get that right inside of an organization?
One study I saw was 8%. So you're
okay.
Yeah. So I think it's important. Now, one of the things that you want to do when you've got those core values is then also define the behaviors, acceptable and unacceptable behaviors. So for missionaries, not mercenaries, what does it mean for me to be a missionary? What does it mean to not be? What can I do or what should I do? Just give examples, right, of the behaviors. And then the next thing you want to do is, so you have to socialize them. So here's, next steps so that you do have a higher percentage next year is socialize and operationalize. So you're going to hire, fire, promote, you're going to make decisions, you're going to develop policies and processes all through the lens of those core values. People will be able to recite them next year if you do that, right? It's because we live everything that we do every day. We look at these core values and we do everything we do through that lens. Right. And so there'll be a higher percentage next year for sure. So
got it. Okay. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. The particularly unique challenge that we have is because we're remote, and obviously since March of 2020, there's a whole bunch more of those people that exist on the planet. How do you see building that employee-centric culture with a remote or a hybrid model. And actually, let's just really focus on a remote model, because to be honest with you, with the hybrid model, you still have that central kind of place where everyone can come together. And I think you can communicate culture very differently, or there's a forcing function towards communicating culture, which is like, oh, well, everyone just is in the office, so we're going to tell you what the company is all about outside of general work hours. With remote, you don't really have that type of connection space. Do you see any unique challenges with that inside of your work?
Yeah, I think what ends up happening is that people have that mindset that culture is linked to a physical location, or culture is about the physical place that when we all have to be together. And again, if you go back to and you think about the things that I just said about how to operationalize those core values, hire, fire, promote, those things can all be done those things can all be done remotely or virtually. Making decisions, those happen day in and day out, right? Through the lens of our core values.
Right.
Developing processes and policies. I don't have to be standing next to you to do that, right? So I think that's the way that people have to think about it differently, is that culture isn't tied to a physical location or anything. It's how things get done around here. I like to say how and why we do things around here. And so if they're operationalized in that way, and you have to deliberately work toward it. It's not something that we just set it and forget it, right? I think even here's a great example. Howard Schultz, when he came back to Starbucks last year, he went on this employee listening tour. And of course, for him, everybody's remote, right? There, except for corporate headquarters, right? But he went on this global listening tour. He wanted to listen to employees and hear what they had to say about what was happening and what wasn't happening within the organization. And basically, one employee said this, and he took it to heart. He basically said that we don't live our values. We don't live our values, and so. All the things that he did going forward to start to turn that around, one of the big messages that came out of that was, I can't be the only person who ensures that my employees around the globe are living their values and living and breathing them every day. I need to make sure that my leaders all around the globe all do what I do. They walk the walk, they talk the talk, they live the mission, they live the vision, they live the core values every day, and they're communicating and they're doing these things, right, through the lens of the core values and working toward that mission. And so that really resonated with me, and I think it ties in with this very well. If you have remote employees, your leaders are obviously remote as well. They've got their departments that they've got to they have to live this. They have to drive this through their departments, through their organizations as well. And so I think that's an important message, and it comes from this massive global organization.
Disseminating that message down.
Yeah.
No,
absolutely.
I agree with you. I know that there's a company called GitLab, and they are not only a remote organization, but they're asynchronously remote. But what they do is they have their mission and their values as an organization, and they comp people based off of their values. So they have 6 core values, and I remember one of them in researching for my book is the value of no long toes in the organization. So that means that anyone can do anything inside of the company, and no one should be stepping on someone else's toes. If that statement is ever made, then that's against the company values, because everyone should just be able to do anything inside of the company whenever they want, and there shouldn't be someone's territory and someone else's territory. I think for me, it's interesting because even going back to the concept of culture, which you talked about, which is a unique set of ideas inside of your organization, or what was your definition of culture again?
Values plus behavior.
Values plus behavior, yeah. So for me, I kind of see it as a unique set of concepts. And what I usually look at when I talk to new people that want to join the company is I try to figure out what divisive concepts do we have inside of our organization that you wouldn't find in other companies. And until March of 2020, it was the biggest one, which was we work remotely. We will never have an office. You will work from home or you work from a co-working space. while you work in this company, and I remember there was a sales guy, and this was a direct kind of course correction for our culture. About 2 years before COVID, we were going to hire a new VP of sales, and we had 3 candidates, and I was interviewing those 3 candidates as one of the final stages before we hired someone.
Yeah.
And I remember the third person that I hired, or that we interviewed, but an hour and a half into the interview, which we were doing on Zoom, he said, well, I don't think that remote work is really something that's going to work out long term. And I said, oh, tell me more. I would love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah.
And he went into this kind of diatribe about how he doesn't think that sales can be done remotely, and salespeople shouldn't be working remotely, and they should be working in a singular office. And that may be true. However, that's not the core culture of who we are as a company. Our mission is to be able to try to help transition the world towards remote work. And
Yeah.
I made it very clear to him right then and there. I said, thank you so much for telling me this information. You are absolutely not qualified to work here under any circumstances whatsoever. And I went back to the HR team and I said, how did you not catch this? How
Yeah.
did you not? Because really, when you think about what culture is all about, at least in my opinion, is these unique things that make you different from anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your
Absolutely.
recruitment team and your HR team is really the tip of the spear when it comes to trying to proliferate that message, not only for new candidates, but for the current, footprint, all the current employees inside of the organization. So I wanted to ask you another kind of question connected to this is, and maybe I almost answered it, but I'd love to hear how you would expand upon it. We use the recruitment team, like that's where I spend the vast majority of my, they must drink the Kool-Aid, they must be the absolute epitome of what we see as who we, they are the epitome of the culture inside of our organization so that they can then communicate that out to other people.
Absolutely.
Are there other ways of doing that? Because to be honest with you right now, like we spend a lot of time working on culture and recruitment and HR just to be able to make sure that that's super clear and that we're bringing in the right types of people. Is there another way of doing it, or is that the best way?
You know what? I as you're talking, I'm going hire for culture fit, hire for culture fit. Absolutely. I mean, that is the way to do it. I mean, if you want to create this culture, whatever your culture is that you want to create, and you bring in people who don't align with your core values or don't align with your mission or don't align with your vision, I mean, it makes no sense. I mean, your example is spot on. It's perfect. You cannot have a remote work environment, 100% remote, and hire somebody, especially an executive who is against that business model, or model of how we're going to work. And so
I literally thought to myself, we're hiring a cancer cell. We're literally hiring someone who's going to completely change the culture, and that is going to proliferate because that's a leader in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. 110%. And it's really funny, and I'll come back to culture fit because I really think that's an important topic. The funny thing is if you think about sales, you're the VP of sales. Do you really want your salespeople in the office? Shouldn't they be out in the field selling?
Sure.
And that's where you want your. I mean, in every company, and I've worked in a bunch of startups too. In every company that I've ever worked in, the head of sales was like, I don't want my people here. I need them to be out in the field meeting with customers or meeting with prospects or going to events or whatever, drumming up business. Why are you here? You're here in the office way too much, So that's ironic. But
I don't know if you know the Zappos story with regards to how they hire their support reps. I found it so incredibly interesting, and I know there's a couple other companies that have followed along with that. Shopify being one of those. At Zappos, the person that the person that picks you up and drops you off, basically, the person that's like your driver, that would be the person that would control whether or not you're the right culture fit. So are you polite to your driver? Are you treating that person with respect? Because you fundamentally don't really need to. And I know that Shopify has actually adopted the same thing where the bartender of... They would run basically these huge kind of get-togethers for a whole bunch of new possible candidates inside of their support department. and their director of support, like literally the third most important executive in the entire company, was the bartender. And he would identify whether or not people were polite to him, whether they were going to give him a tip, like whether they were going to treat him with respect. And he just immediately was able to identify, oh, here's 20% of these people that we can just pull right out of our resume pool because they just don't meet our culture.
Yeah. You don't treat the janitor any differently than you treat anybody else in the organization, basically, you know. I mean, that's the bottom line, you know. I mean, it's, and that's why they say, you know, with culture fit and hire for attitude, train for skill. Sorry, I'm getting all choked up.
No worries.
Hire for attitude, train for skill, right? I mean, if you can train people for any job, you know, but I'm gonna have to take a drink.
Yep,
but what are your thoughts on that? Is that how you guys, do you guys look at it that way as well?
So we definitely have a culture fit first before we actually look at how the candidate is fit in terms of their qualifications. We also remove, and this has been somewhat divisive inside of our company, but we remove location. And so this has been a really interesting forcing function for us because we have started to hire much more internationally in countries that we wouldn't have otherwise thought about hiring in, simply because we're just removing the, this person is in New York. Well, that's obviously the person that we should be hiring because they're located in New York, right? And we end up, our director of HR and recruitment is in Buenos Aires, in Brazil.
Oh, wow.
Really amazing guy, like fantastic executive, but we probably wouldn't have hired him had we not removed the location-based bias that we have inside of that. I want to get back to the question that is probably on everyone's brains right now. So even for us, like we're freezing hiring over the next quarter or two. We just really want to kind of see what's going to be happening next with regards to the economy. Assuming the worst, assuming a 30% haircut on the S&P 500 in the next couple of weeks, right? Or months. If you had to say, what are the 3 things that you need to be able to retain as the CEO or the founder of a company to make sure that you've got that nucleus of the culture? Because I think fundamentally it's like, if you let go of 20% of your workforce, the other 80% are going to be scared, right? They're going to be really concerned about that. They might be looking for another job right now, and you know it's going to be a very, very stressful time. What are the pieces that you really need to be able to make sure that you're holding together during this very shaky period? Is it like employee perks? Is it refocusing on the mission and the values inside of the organization? Is it making sure that people recognize that they're safe and secure in their jobs? Because actually, in that case, you may not actually be able to know that for sure. Yeah. Or is it, in my opinion, I have a personal concept that I have inside of the book, which is radical transparency, which is giving everyone the same informational advantage as the CEO of the company. If you give that to every single person inside of your organization, they start acting like CEOs magically because they just have the same information. It's not because the CEO is smarter, it's because he has an informational advantage, or she, in comparison to everyone else in the company. So what are the big pieces that people should really be paying attention to?
I think culture, 110%, right? I mean, that's, you've really got to keep maintain that regardless of what happens. Don't ever step away from that, or, you know, like I said earlier, it's deliberately designed, and it's not something that you set and forget. It's something you have to work for every day. Communication, your point about transparency, absolutely, but communication, I mean, it's even more important. Communication is always important, and we always talk about open and honest and candid communication as part of a great employee experience. I love your point about transparency. Absolutely. I think now it's time to over communicate, right? Keep people in the loop. People are sitting there, and I went through, back in 2000, I went through layoffs with the .com, right? And that's what we were all looking for, is what's going on, what's happening next, where are we now, what's going to happen next week, just keeping people in the loop. And yeah, absolutely, to your point, is transparent as you can be, but just communicate. Don't over communicate is I think the big thing. And I think the other thing to really focus on is to not forget your customers. It's a rough time for them too. They're going through, we're all going through it, right? And that's the thing. I think COVID is sort of it's sort of a training ground, a reminder of what we need to do. And it was a mess. Mm-hmm. It was a mess for customers. It was a mess for employees. And then I think very quickly, this is what happened with friends of mine who got laid off in the early months of COVID, mm-hmm. who are in the customer experience profession. Very quickly, first of all, they were repurposed. They were let go. They don't focus on the customer experience. Go, I need you over here doing whatever, And then within weeks or month and a half, all of a sudden they were being moved back to, because we need data, we need insights, we need to know what customers are doing and why they're doing it, what they're buying and how they're feeling and all of that. So very quickly, executives glommed onto data. I need data. I need to know mm-hmm. what are my customers doing. And so I think that's an important thing. Anytime there's any kind of downturn or issue or anything that's disrupting the businesses, don't forget about the customers and don't give up on customer experience. Read the data, read the tea leaves, have a really good understanding of what your customers are going through and what their needs are, so that you can direct the business to be there for them. So and you might even uncover some opportunities that you never even knew you had. So
it's funny because I literally just came out of a meeting where we were having a debate about attribution, and just where are our customers coming from and all this kind of stuff. And then we were also having a big discussion about our churn attribution. So customers that are leaving us, why are they leaving us? Do we need more information? Do we need this information? That kind of thing. You talked about collecting data. What would you say is the top 3 pieces of data that you would want to collect from a customer perspective to be able to make sure that you keep a good pulse on your customer base, particularly during this time, right? Because I think we're going to see, as I said, we are generally preparing for maybe 10% of our customers just end up saying they can't pay their bills anymore, and or maybe higher, and we need to be able to see that coming down the line. That was exactly what happened with us with regards to COVID. There were a whole bunch of customers that said, hey, we just can't afford your product anymore. And we said, perfect. We're going to, we gave everyone 3 months for free that basically couldn't afford it. And then we would just bring them back on as a paid customer after the fact. And that honestly saved us millions and millions of dollars, because they were the people that said, oh, well, these guys actually gave us 3 months for free and were able to work with us to be able to get us back on track.
I think that's a great example, and it shows that you care and that you're not just there to make money, right? I talk about in the book too, people before profits, people before products, and people before metrics, right? So put the people first. And I think the things that I would want to know are during a downturn are very similar to the things I want to know anytime, which is where are you today, right? What problems are you trying to solve today? What issues, what are you dealing with? And just really get an understanding of who your customers are, and what they're dealing with. And like I said, there may be some opportunities in there, like you uncovered, that will save you down the line. So I think it really is about that, just staying in the loop with them. So asking them for their feedback, especially if you've got them on the phone or you've got them in front of you, talk to them. It can be just completely unsolicited, or it can just be just, hey, how's your day going, and how are you handling everything that's going on in the world today, kind of thing. But really, I think the bottom line there is, how can we help you? So what problems are you trying to solve, and what issues are you dealing with today that we can help you with, and truly be genuine about it, and don't make it an opportunistic kind of thing. So, and I think we need to do the same thing with employees as well.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that it will be very interesting to see which of these companies that were all about culture 3-6 months ago end up throwing all that stuff out the window, and who continues to commit to having a employee focused culture? Because, I mean, to your point, I think there's going to be a lot of stressors on us over the next couple weeks and months, and so it'll be interesting to find out. Maybe we can have you back and do the post-mortem after the fact of that.
That would be interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so
I like to just say, stay the course, right? If do the things that you're doing, continue doing them, stay the course, because it's going to be harder when you come back. You know, you had the example of, you know, you gave them that
3
service
months.
or product for
Yeah.
3 months, right? It's customer acquisition is hard. Customer retention is even harder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so do the things that you can do now, and then you won't be behind once we get out of this thing, right?
Well, coming from a marketing guy, which is my experience, it costs you 10 times more money to be able to get a customer than keep a customer. So giving someone 3 months of free service that can't afford it is such the right economic decision. Because to buy that customer, it's probably going to cost you 28 months to be able to acquire that customer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thanks for taking the time. It's Annette from Built to Win and Customer Understanding. And where can people get a hold of you? I'm assuming cxjourney.com would probably be the biggest place. Is there anywhere else?
cx-journey.com or AnnetteFranz.com, either one. And then LinkedIn. I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. We love some of the conversations that we start out there. So yeah, absolutely, connect with me there.
Okay, we'll put that down in the show notes too.